YouTube, what's going on? I'm trying to make this video, trying to make it quick. It's hot in here. I'm dying, slowly, just slowly melting. It's hot. I got the APU off so I can make this damn video. All right. How to keep yourself sane in the truck. Audiobooks and podcasts. You can listen to music, we know that. You can listen to talk music and the talk radio on Sirius XM. Sirius XM ain't worth the money to me, so that's just my opinion. After having Sirius XM, I didn't like that. Not that I didn't like it, but I found myself listening to the same stuff over and over again, and it was like the same as when I had cable TV. I only watch the same 5-6 channels. Why in the hell do I gotta pay, $100 a month for 100 and some channels I ain't gonna watch? Don't make sense. So, yeah. So we all know about music. You can listen to music on a number of ways, a number of devices. So we're gonna talk about podcasts. We're gonna talk about audiobooks. Real quick. Keep yourself sane. Exercise the noodle. Okay, don't let your noodle get soft. Okay, don't let your brain get mushy. I know it's already mushy, right? Okay, you sitting in the truck 10 hours a day, every day. You out 2 weeks at a time. Your brain's getting mushy. Your body's getting mushy. Okay, you got to do mental pull-ups. Okay, just the same way you got to get out the truck and do some push-ups and some jumping jacks and get yourself some dumbbells. Get some chest flies on, get some shoulder pressing or something. You got to do something. You got to exercise the noodle. You lose it. Give yourself more places to get your information from. Okay, you can. So podcasts, audiobooks, and then we're gonna talk about real brief newspaper. Now, or let's say news sources, right? Podcasts. You can get podcasts from Pandora. You can get podcasts on Spotify. You can get podcasts from iTunes. You can get podcasts. You can just Google podcasts to see which ones are popular, and then Google will take you to a site that's going to display you podcasts, right? At different random sites, probably the home sites of the actual podcast. Some of the bigger podcasts who have funding or who have studios, right? You'll go to their straight up website. Google is the best thing in the world. That's why their stock is almost $1,000 a share. Right? So that's podcasts. Podcasts, you can listen to podcasts about anything. Now, keep saying this thing about expanding the noodle, growing the noodle, being, don't let your brain get soft. Okay? Learn about business, learn about finance. You can do stuff, educational stuff. Learn about numbers, learn about algebra, learn about geometry, right? Learn about literature classics, right? There's probably podcasts on photography, right? There's podcasts on sports. You can listen to podcasts about anything, right? Think about something you want to know and try to find a podcast for it. Expand the noodle, baby. Or if you just want to be entertained, then just find a podcast that you might find entertaining. Like I said, you can find them in those places that I said. Kind of explore, see what you come up with. I listen to crime podcasts. I find them interesting. That's what it is. That's what I listen to for podcasts. Not so much to expand my mind, but for entertainment. Because I find that sometimes when you go so hard in the paint and you want to you're just trying to stuff your brain full of all this information, sometimes your brain needs a break. So I just listen to stuff for entertainment. And that usually helps, usually jumps itself into another idea. Like, I'm listening to a podcast and questioning, well, what does this word mean? What does this mean? I don't know what this means. Then I look it up, and then that leads me to looking up something else, and then looking up something else, and then looking up something else, and by the time I'm done, I done learned a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't know before. Audiobooks, pretty self-explanatory. Audiobooks, I get my audiobooks from either YouTube or audible.com. YouTube is free. Type in the title of the book, see if it's an audiobook, see if you can find the entire book on YouTube, right? Books I found on YouTube are like really for entertainment purposes. What was that book called? World War Z. World War Z was a really good audiobook because it's like a whole cast of people. It's kind of cool. World War Z is a good one. Ender's Game is a good one. It's a good book, Ender's Game. Rich Dad Poor Dad you can find as an audiobook if you don't have a hard copy, or you just want to listen to it, or you want to reintroduce yourself to the material, or introduce yourself to the material, right? Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Good book. It's a good book. It's a nice primer, a nice start to looking at money and looking at money differently, right? It takes a while. But Rich Dad Poor Dad, and what else? Now I point out Rich Dad Poor Dad because I have the book. It's here. I have the book. It's the only book I have in my truck, right? Because that's where my head. That's where my head was when I came into trucking. Rich Dad Poor Dad. We trying to get some bread, long-term bread. Trying to build some wealth. So yeah, that's what you can do. Audiobooks. Those were a couple titles to look at. YouTube is free. Audible is not. Audible.com. Audible is $16 a month. And then on top of that, you pay for the books, right? Books, the books aren't always expensive. Sometimes the books are going to range in price from 99 cents to about $30. The books I have on my Audible, I got 10 books. The most expensive book was $17. But it was a good book. Most of my books are $7, $5, 99 cents, $3, stuff like that. I don't spend too much. But like I said, I like to read. So it's not a big thing for me, and it's a write-off, right? Books, entertainment. Meals and entertainment. It's a write-off. And I search for write-offs every time I get into my truck, as much as possible. Right? So that's what that is for me. It's a write-off. I like books. I read a lot. These are things that can keep you sane in your truck, okay? As opposed to simply just listening to music, and you can use these things to expand the noodle, and at least part of you will stay strong, okay? Your body may be trapped in the truck, but they don't have your brain. They don't have your mind. They can't lock your mind. Remember that, okay? Now that sounds like some old jail talk, but I'm just saying. A lot of people get in this truck and get so focused on the trucking and get into the routine that you become a robot. You know what I'm saying? And you don't need to do that, man. Just come in here, there's a lot of stuff I was doing or I'm into before I got into trucking. Don't mean I gotta not do those now that I'm in trucking. Reading. I've always been a reader, right? And we can sit here, I can talk about books with anybody. But you can, my point is, you can find some books to read, learn something, and or just some stuff for entertainment that will use your imagination, right? Because once you start using the imagination, you start thinking about things differently, right? So if you use use the books for entertainment, and you're entertained by listening to the books, you start using your imagination, you start thinking about things differently. You can use that same imagination when it comes to the money that you are making and that you are trying very hard to keep, because you are busting your behind in this truck, running all across the country or just away from home. I don't care if you're away from home 14 hours a day or fucking 14 days at a time, you're away from home, right? And if the goal, if you don't want to always be away from home, that's a problem for you. You need to think about ways to get back home, and the only way you're going to do that is to expand your mind outside of the scope of simply the truck that you are in. There, I've said my piece. I'm off my soapbox. I promise. I'm tired. I'm hot. I need to lay down. I need to make some phone calls, and I need to turn my APU back on. So, YouTube,